I mean, one of the things that sort of is in this book, of course, because it's set in Shanghai, and the house in which your hero is raised caters to both Chinese and foreigners, which is rather unusual. And I mean, this is a sort of a divide that I think we're still slugging our way out of. And I thought we were just talking before we came down here, and I want to kind of download Amy a bit on this. I don't know if you all know, but the other day, Ambassador Gary Locke, who's a very good friend of Amy's and mine, and he's a Chinese American and married to a wonderful Chinese American woman from Washington. He's leaving China after almost 3 years of service. And he gave a kind of a farewell speech, a quite gracious speech. He also, you know, reminded people about human rights and certain American values, and all fine. But it was basically, I thought, a very sort of gracious farewell. And then there popped up in the Chinese press just the other day, I was in China when this happened, an absolutely, in my view, horrendous editorial written by someone clearly with a pseudonym. It was put out over one of China's two main official news services. And I want to just read a few lines from it and get reaction from Amy, because it raises this question of who are you when you're a Chinese American? And, you know, does China get to claim you? Or are you American? Or how do you negotiate this divide? So here's what this person wrote. You should note that in the late 40s, there was an ambassador, John Leighton Stewart, was the last ambassador to China before Mao took over. And Mao wrote a very famous letter of farewell to Leighton Stewart. It was rather a snide letter. So this editorial was sort of in the style of this letter which Mao had said, kind of, you know, good riddance to John Leighton Stewart. And in this editorial, this person, Wang Ping, said, Gary Locke is a US-born third-generation Chinese American, and his being a banana, yellow skin, and white heart become an advantage for Obama's foreign policy. And then it went on to say, however, after a while, a banana will inevitably start to rot. I mean, and then it goes on and on and on. But this is the most hideous sort of stereotype of the, you know, the black American who's an Oreo cookie, or I don't know, there are other sort of terrible examples of this sort of racial slur. And I think this must have made Gary Locke feel really rotten. But what do you think was going on here?
Well, there is this question of race, and that race assigns your responsibilities to whether it's a community or literature in my case, but also in government, in foreign policy. You know, I was reminded when we heard about this, it obviously relates a little bit to, or a great deal to, what happened when the man Chen, what was his?
Chen Guangcheng, blind activist, legal activist,
who went to the embassy for asylum, and you know, it raised this ruckus, and somehow behind the doors there was you know, a deal made, and he was escorted
and Gary Locke
away.
Accepted him in.
Yes, Gary Locke accepted him. There was a big brouhaha about that, and what was, you know, China's response going to be. And there had to have been some kind of agreement for this guy to be able to leave the embassy and get on an airplane. We don't know what that is. But at the same time, there was a parallel case to that years before, and that was when Feng Lizhi, the physicist, was allowed to remain in the embassy when he had left and wanted asylum. Now, that was also a huge brouhaha, but because James Lilly was not Chinese, his race was white, they didn't have that kind of insult where it was as though James Lilly was a traitor, that he was somebody who...
racial obligation.
Racial obligation. He was seen purely on the basis of his role as ambassador to China, U.S. ambassador to China. So to add on this layer that has only to do with race, and to expect that U.S. policy in China should have been determined in part by the fact that Gary Locke is Chinese, that doesn't make any sense. Why somebody would believe that, that his principles would change. I think his principles were very much for cooperation, and we've seen that in his time with the embassy. But, that assumption, I think, comes perhaps also from a legacy in China for sometimes going back and determining who of the people who left China are traitors to China, and are very strong from those who left for Hong Kong or for Taiwan, or in cases like my mother, that these people are traitors. There's a certain behavior and thought that you have to adhere to. My mother leaving China for the United States was also one of the reasons why her daughters who were left behind were treated as though they had bad backgrounds, and that limited some of their opportunities, which was also very common. Somewhere in your family, whether it was your mother or 500 years ago, it was always uncertain where that was. But you could suffer the consequences. So, you know far better than I what this notion is, in terms of history and politics, and how that plays in, that the history that continues to evolve, and sometimes it changes and is more open, and then other times there's this sudden direction in which there's an expectation